Hi guys, today I wanted to talk about cash flow on your homestead or farm. Now I just watched the video that Fushomatic put up. I think it was yesterday. It was a really good video, and she was talking about how her off-grid homestead is more like a life plan, more like a I'm not really exactly, she just said it really well. So you guys should go check out that video that she put up yesterday about off-grid but not crazy. And I wanted to talk about cash flow because she was talking about keeping your kids on the farm, being able to farm and homestead in a way that your children will stay on this piece of property and farm themselves. That all the work that you put into this homestead, all the work that you put into this farm will not be for nothing, that it won't go into the hands of strangers. And along that line, I know I've talked about this book before, but it needs to be talked about again, family-friendly farming. And he talks, in this, Joel Salatin talks about how to have multi-generational farming where kids stay on the farm and it's profitable for them. And above all, the thing you really want for your kids is that they don't have to start over at ground zero to try and make a success out of their lives, that instead they can stand on your shoulders and have the things that they really care about in life. And so I'm going to talk from my experience about homesteading and cash flow. My parents were on a 10-acre farm, and we didn't have a lot of money. We were a single family income situation. I had two parents in the same home, but my dad was the one that worked. And because there were 7 children, my mom pretty much had her hands full with raising us, not necessarily in working the farm. It was us kids who did most of the actual grunt work with animals and that kind of thing. And because of that, there wasn't any cash flow directly from the farm. The farm didn't make any money. The farm ate money. And it was short-lived. As soon as the kids left to go to college and things like that, my parents couldn't keep up with it. And over the course of a few years, once the girls left the farm, they got rid of the milk goats. Once my oldest younger brothers left the farm, they got rid of the milk cows. And then once my younger brothers were in public school at that point, so they weren't available during the day, my dad got down to where he just raised a few beef cows. He was still making hay, but fences still needed to be repaired, and outbuildings needed to be maintained, and still had the tractor and all that. And fast forward to today. So we started our little homestead in the city, and it ate money. We went through money very quickly trying to get fruit trees established and buy our livestock and grow a garden and have that kind of lifestyle. And my husband was not really that into it, and I think part of it was just because the only benefit we really had in it was that it was cheaper to create our own food than it was to buy it in many instances, like having the chickens that would eat food scraps, and that then we had the eggs. So there was that trade-off of having better food, but it wasn't actually necessarily an increase of money into our home. At best, we would break even because, and what we would get was a higher quality of food. So that was our first homestead. Then we moved here. And we moved to a bigger place, and all of a sudden we had a need for even more money because now we had all this space to get infrastructure set up in so that at least we could break even. And it was very difficult. It was difficult on a one-income family situation to be able to take those large sums of money and put them into systems for watering and to put them into systems for growing trees and then to buy hay for the milk goats and things like that. And I was just racking my brain trying to make things come to even because feed for the animals was where we weren't breaking even. And it was costing us so much in feed that we couldn't afford to ever sell any of our animal products. It just wasn't feasible. And at that point, that's when I started to listen to the podcast for Paul Wheaton, and he started to talk about residual income. And residual income is something where you put the effort in once and then it continues to pay you through the years without you having to put any more effort into it. And the idea of that just boggled my mind, and yet it made sense. I had things that I was seeing online that I was reading or books that I was buying that I could use forever, and yet they were written 50 years ago. And so whoever it was that wrote them or put those videos up or whatever, they were still getting the income from having made those things that 50 years later I would be reading. So I was like, that would be brilliant. It would be brilliant because you're being paid for an idea rather than for a physical object that you need to create. And so that is where I turned to YouTube. And the income for our family for the last year and a half, we have made residual income from YouTube, because the ideas in my head and the things that I'm creating, I'm able to share with other people, and then it allows me to have bigger and better ideas and bigger and better projects here on the farm, on the homestead. And what pays for it is what I've already done, that I don't have to recreate. And the other source of income that's starting to come in is from our Etsy store, because with the wool, a lot of times people will have garbage wool that they'll give me, wool that they don't want to have to deal with, that I'm willing to clean up and do beautiful things with, and it gives me something to do during my day when I have my chores done, when I'm sitting here doing nothing. And so for me, that's a pleasurable thing. The crafting is something I really enjoy, and so part of the payment that I receive is the joy that I receive from making it, but it also brings in a little bit of money to our homestead. Now, over time, I will get better at both of those things. Over time, I will get better at making YouTube videos, and I will be able to have better projects as I improve my projects, I'll be able to continue to take videos of them. And over time, as I get better at my crafting, at my spinning, I'll be able to charge more money for the things that I'm making and be more selective about the projects that I take. And having that frees me up on my farm. It means that if I need some tractor work done, instead of having to maintain a tractor myself, I could hire a neighbor to come and do the tractor work for me. It means that I have money to upgrade and increase the quality of my breeding stock. It means that I don't have to worry about whether or not there will be money there to pay for feed this winter. It takes so much stress off of the people who are trying to do it, and allows, instead of looking at the homestead as just some kind of dream, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily making a living off the homestead. It just means that your farm is paying for itself. They're two separate things. And while eventually you could be like Joel Salatin and actually make your living off of the farm, at the beginning there's no shame in just making enough money to be able to support your farm itself. And I really don't know how to describe the burden that's taken off of my shoulders and off my husband's shoulders by the fact that because of the YouTube channel, I was able to go take chamomile to the vet, and I didn't have to make that decision about whether my home doctoring was going to be good enough and if we were going to have groceries that month or we were going to take chamomile to the vet. And that's a real life emotional situation. I've had that situation before where I didn't have the money to take an animal to the vet, and it was a 50-50 chance whether or not they would survive the whatever health crisis they were going through. It was a very rare health crisis that I had to make that decision, that I didn't take them to the vet. But how much nicer would it have been if I could have just made the decision, I can't handle this, I need to go to the vet. Because a lot of people are homesteading because they don't have a lot of money. They're doing it to feed their family. And when those moments come up, when you have to choose between the farm and the family, a lot of people have to make the decision to let go of the farm because it's not feeding them and it's costing more than what is being put out. So I think we need to work really hard at not lying to ourselves and prettying up the situation, and being able to look at it mathematically at times and say, are we getting enough out of this to justify what we're putting in? And it may be different for an older family. If you no longer have young children and maybe both spouses are able to work at that point, that's a different situation. Maybe you want to be able to just pour that money into it. But for instance, here's our next scheme, our next money-making scheme would be, Paige has told me that what she really wants to do is when she's grown up, she wants to have a bed and breakfast. She wants to be able to have strangers come here, and she wants to be able to cook for them. And In order for that to happen, we would have to have somewhere we could house them that wasn't in our immediate home, to give them some privacy and to give us some privacy, and allow for a little bit of autonomy, but to allow them to be able to interact with the animals and eat our homegrown food and have that be a lovely thing. That's what Paige wants to do. Now, in order to do that, I would need a bully barn. How much does a bully barn cost? It costs about $5,000 to make it livable and have it be something we could have visitors stay in. We are in a good situation to be able to do that because we are almost directly in the path to go up to Yellowstone and to go up to Island Park and all of these fun wildlife nature things to do. And if people could stay at our little KOA cabin type of space here on our farm, it would probably be a pretty good pull for an occasional tourist family to come through. So the business model would be sound. However, I don't have $5,000 to put up for a little KOA cabin. And we have found that doing things like Kickstarter, where I offer something that I can make that has greater value than what I'm asking for it, has enabled us to create enough of a cash flow that we don't have to go into debt to further our farm and to further our business trial runs here on our farm. And so for those of you who are looking for a bigger capital base to start from, something like a Kickstarter might be a really good idea. However, I do believe that it needs to be a Kickstarter because you need to show value, that you are returning value for value rather than just having it be a plea for money. Because that's not how you make friends, that's not how you keep people around, is to just ask for money. The exception probably is if you were in an emergency situation and you knew that people cared, and then something like maybe, what are they called? A GoFundMe. If you have an actual physical need and you need to fix things now, maybe a GoFundMe. But for as far as starting a business, I think a Kickstarter is more appropriate because then you can let people show that you're dependable and that your products are good. And so watch for that in the future. Those are some of the things that we're looking at doing. Our other thing is I wanted to build something like a, oh, what is that crazy lady's? Solviva. Have you guys heard of Solviva? She's a lady that likes to put up plans for greenhouses attached to barns and greenhouses attached to homes that help to heat in the winter, and that where she grows her plants, that supposedly she has this farm that makes all this money. I think she's a little bit crazy because I haven't heard very many good reviews about her books, and I think if it was a real thing that she was doing, we would have heard about her more. But I want to do a barn that is along that model. I want to have a barn where I can put the animals that keeps them a little warmer in the winter and also gives me space to grow some plants in the winter for overwintering. So those are just things we're juggling around in our heads that are future, because it just feels so good to have money in the bank account to take care of the farm. I cannot tell you what a relief it is to know that that doesn't have to come out of a personal bank account that is already that is already going for other things. Like we're debt free, with the exception of our home, and we're trying to pay that forward. And at this point, we're able to make a mortgage payment every 3 weeks, and so we are something like 6 months ahead on our mortgage, and we should be able to have our home paid off by the time that I'm 43, which, you know, that's a pretty big deal in my opinion. If we had more income coming in from the farm, we could have it paid off before we're 40. And isn't that exciting? Isn't that exciting to have the thought that you can grab hold of your own destiny, grab hold of your own future, and instead of being sad and feeling like life is controlling you, to be able to look around for the opportunities that you have, to make the most of them and to be the best you can be. Isn't that an exciting prospect? That not to be sitting on your butt just wondering why life is passing you by, but to be grateful for blessings and look for other ways that you can help people. And the more influence you have, the more you can help the people around you. the better our homestead gets, the more beautiful videos I can put up. The more I can say, oh, I tried this. Don't do this. Don't do it this way. This was a bad way. Do it this way. Because I failed 5,000 times and this is the way that worked for me. And it's a process. It doesn't mean that every single one of my videos that I put up is going to go viral and be this big hit. But it gives me practice. The duds are just as important as the successes, as long as you're not going into a huge debt for them, is kind of my opinion. Allow your growth to pay for your growth. And that is my blab fest for today. I was kind of excited about this because I was trying to think in my brain, why was it that we didn't stay on the farm? Why was it that my parents' work, all the hard work that they did, why was it that none of us wanted that? Because my parents offered to sell me their farm and they would have given me a price discount if I'd wanted it. But I looked at it and all the work that needed to be done, and I knew that I couldn't do it myself. Even though it had all the infrastructure, it had the tractors and the fences and the watering system and the solar panels and everything were set up. Because along the way it wasn't turned into a profitable venture and there were not means created to allow for the farm to pay for itself, even after 20 years, there was no income coming in from it. And it would have been my husband's paycheck that would have been drained to keep it going. And only me at home to do the work to keep all those hay fields and everything going. And so it was a physical impossibility for me to take it over. However, if along the way and early on, there had been small means of allowing the farm to pay for itself that could have been implemented, and maybe even hiring people from the outside to come in and take over the job of the children as we went and did other things with our lives, if those small steps could have been taken and it had become a business and it had become profitable, then by the time that my parents had wanted to retire, it would have been set up in a way that we kids could have stepped in and done it, because there would have been help already built into the system. And maybe then my parents could have built a small home on the property and stayed on and continued to watch it. But that wasn't what happened. It was too much of a burden. And so right now I'm trying really hard to listen to Paige when she's talking about what she's interested in developing and what kind of business she wants to have, and allowing her to take part in that so that we can be sensitive to the loves and desires of our children and develop that in our business and in our home farm, so that when we're not able or when we need to cut back due to age, our kids can take over and it will have already been developed into something that they have a desire to do. Blah, 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 blah. I never stop talking to it. Anyway, make sure to like and subscribe and share our videos with everybody. It makes a really big difference. We don't get paid a lot for our YouTube videos, but every penny counts. And thank you so much for those of you who've been fan funding. I've seen what you've been doing, and it makes the difference every month. You just don't know that it makes a difference every month. And thank you so much for your kindness and for your friendship. And we'll talk to you later.